Have you ever wondered if the world you're living in right now is actually the same one you were born into? What if we told you that there are documented cases of people who claim they've returned from parallel worlds where humanity took a completely different path? If you think that alternate realities only exist in science fiction and that our timeline is the only one that's ever existed, then we're really curious to hear how you're going to explain these 14 mysterious cases. Stories of people who woke up one day to find that history had changed, that countries had different borders, that world events happened differently, or that loved ones never existed at all. So let's jump straight into the first case. And trust us, this one will shake everything you thought you knew about reality. This case is absolutely mind-bending and will make you question everything you think you know about reality. In 2019, a woman named Rebecca Martinez from San Diego, California, walked into a police station in a state of complete panic, insisting that something was terribly, terribly wrong with the world around her. She claimed that when she went to sleep the night before, the Statue of Liberty didn't exist, had never existed, and that in her world, France had never given such a monument to the United States. But when she woke up that morning and turned on the news, there it was, standing tall in New York Harbor, as if it had been there for over a century. The officers initially thought she was confused or having a mental health crisis, but what happened next left them deeply unsettled. Rebecca wasn't hysterical or confused. She was a 34-year-old high school history teacher with no history of mental illness, no drug use, and by all accounts, a perfectly rational person. She calmly explained to the officers that in her world, in her memories, France had given the United States a different gift to commemorate their alliance, a grand fountain that stood in Washington, D.C., not a statue in New York. She described this fountain in incredible detail, down to the bronze eagles that decorated its base and the inscriptions in French that circled its rim. Imagine how you would feel if you woke up tomorrow and a major landmark had suddenly always existed when you know with absolute certainty it never did. The officers took detailed notes, and one of them, Detective Marco Santos, decided to dig deeper rather than simply dismiss her claim. He asked Rebecca specific questions about history, about her education, about what she remembered learning in school. And here's where things get extremely creepy. Rebecca knew her American history perfectly, except for one detail. Every single reference to the Statue of Liberty was missing from her memories. She remembered learning about Ellis Island as an immigration checkpoint, but with no mention of the famous statue overlooking it. She remembered studying French-American relations, but the gift from France was always described as the fountain, never Lady Liberty. Detective Santos asked her to describe what she thought New York Harbor looked like. Rebecca pulled out her phone and began searching for images. When pictures of the Statue of Liberty appeared in her search results, she visibly recoiled. She insisted these images must be doctored, created as some kind of elaborate hoax. But then something happened that absolutely no one expected. Rebecca opened her photo gallery and showed them pictures from a family vacation to New York City just 6 months earlier. In every single photo where the Statue of Liberty should have been visible in the background, there was nothing. Just empty sky and water. The metadata on the photos confirmed they were taken in March of 2019 with her phone, with no signs of editing or manipulation. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Detective Santos contacted Rebecca's family and friends to verify her story. Her husband confirmed that yes, they had visited New York together, and he too remembered there being no statue. But when he checked his own photos from that same trip on his phone, the Statue of Liberty was clearly visible in the backgrounds, the exact same locations, the exact same day, but completely different images. Pretty insane, right? Some skeptics argue that Rebecca might have experienced a rare psychological condition where false memories feel completely real. Others suggest she might have been part of an elaborate hoax or social experiment. But how do you explain the photographs on her phone showing empty harbor water, where a 151-foot statue should stand? How do you explain her husband's matching memories that directly contradict his own photographic evidence? There's a theory among quantum physicists that suggests our consciousness might occasionally shift between parallel timelines, realities that are almost identical to ours, but with small, sometimes significant differences. Could Rebecca have somehow slipped from a timeline where France's gift to America took a different form? A world where the Statue of Liberty never existed and some other monument stood in its place? To this day, Rebecca maintains that her memories are real, that she came from somewhere else. She's joined online communities of people who claim similar experiences, individuals who remember history differently, and wake up to find the world has changed in ways they can't explain. So, what do you think? Was this a genuine shift between parallel worlds, or is there a rational explanation we're missing? And if she really did come from another timeline, how many other people are walking around right now, living in a world that doesn't match their memories? During the summer of 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, customs officials encountered a well-dressed European man carrying a passport from a country that, according to every map, every history book, and every official record, has never existed. The country was called Taured, and the man insisted it was located between France and Spain, where the tiny principality of Andorra sits in our world. But here's what makes this case so absolutely fascinating. The man didn't seem crazy or confused. He was calm, educated, spoke multiple languages, and carried documentation from his apparent homeland, including business papers, currency, and a driver's license, all bearing the name of this mysterious country. When officials showed him a map and pointed to Andorra, he became visibly frustrated and confused, insisting they were showing him the wrong map and that Taured had existed for over 1,000 years. The man had arrived on a routine flight from Europe and appeared to be a seasoned business traveler. His passport showed stamps from multiple countries, including previous entries into Japan, suggesting this wasn't his first international trip. He was dressed in an expensive suit, carried himself with confidence, and spoke fluent Japanese, French, and several other languages. Everything about him suggested a legitimate international businessman, except for one impossible detail: his homeland didn't exist. Customs officials examined his passport closely. The document looked completely authentic, with official seals, watermarks, and security features that would have been extremely difficult to forge in 1954. But the issuing country, Taured, appeared nowhere on any map. The officials assumed it must be a sophisticated forgery and called in airport security. Imagine being that man, confidently presenting your documents, only to be told that your entire country has never existed. How would you react? But then things got even more bizarre. The man produced a driver's license from Taured, company checks drawn on a Taured bank, and paper currency featuring the Taured coat of arms and unfamiliar historical figures. He even carried business cards from a company headquartered in Taured's capital city. When investigators examined these items, they found them to be printed on genuine paper stock with professional printing techniques, not crude forgeries. The man also had Japanese yen in his wallet and hotel reservations in Tokyo, suggesting he'd made this trip before without incident. The man insisted he was in Japan for a business meeting with a company that officials later confirmed did exist. He provided the name of his Japanese business partner and the address of his hotel. Everything checked out, except for his impossible country of origin. Airport authorities decided to detain him overnight in a nearby hotel while they investigated further. They placed guards outside his room and kept his passport and documents for analysis. The man cooperated fully, seemingly more confused about the situation than worried about being detained. Now, here's where this case becomes absolutely insane. The next morning, when officials went to question him, further, the man had vanished, completely disappeared from a hotel room that was under constant guard. The door had been locked from the inside, the windows were sealed, and the guards swore no one had entered or left. And perhaps even more mysteriously, all of his documents, the passport, the driver's license, the currency, the business papers, everything had vanished as well from the secured evidence room at the airport. Absolutely no one could explain how both the man and his documents could disappear from two separate locations that were both under watch. Some skeptics argue this entire story is an urban legend that has grown more elaborate over the decades. Others suggest the man might have been a very sophisticated con artist whose escape was carefully planned. But here's what makes those explanations hard to accept. Japanese officials kept detailed records, and while the original documents are gone, the incident was logged in airport security reports. Multiple customs agents witnessed the event and gave consistent accounts of what happened. There's a theory that this man somehow traveled from a parallel timeline where European history unfolded differently, where Taured emerged as a nation in the same region where Andorra exists in our world. When he crossed between worlds, perhaps during his flight, he suddenly found himself in a reality where his homeland had never existed. And when officials detained him, maybe whatever force brought him here pulled him back to his original timeline, erasing all evidence of his brief visit to our world. To this day, no one has been able to definitively prove or disprove the man from Tored's existence. So, what really happened at Haneda Airport in 1954? Was this a traveler from a parallel world who briefly crossed into ours? Or is there a more mundane explanation that somehow accounts for his impossible documents and his mysterious disappearance? And if he was real, is he back in Tored right now, telling people about his strange experience in a world where his country didn't exist? What you're about to hear sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but this case was reported by multiple people across different countries who had never met each other. In 2012, dozens of individuals began posting online about their vivid memories of the Beijing Olympics happening in 2007 instead of 2008. But it wasn't just a simple mistake about dates. These people remembered watching specific events, celebrating certain victories, and even recalled where they were during the opening ceremony, all in the summer of 2007. When confronted with official records proving the Olympics took place in 2008, they didn't simply admit they were wrong. Instead, they described feeling a profound sense of wrongness, as if reality itself had been rewritten and they were the only ones who remembered the original version. The phenomenon first emerged on a popular forum dedicated to discussing memory and collective consciousness. A user named Marcus Chen from Vancouver posted a detailed thread describing his confusion when he looked up information about the Beijing Olympics and found the date listed as 2008. He insisted that he clearly remembered watching Michael Phelps win his 8 gold medals during the summer of 2007 because it coincided with his college graduation that June. He even described having an Olympics-themed graduation party where friends gathered to watch the swimming finals. Within hours of Marcus posting his experience, the thread exploded with responses. A woman from Australia named Emma Richardson shared that she too remembered the Olympics in 2007. Specifically because she was pregnant at the time and gave birth to her daughter in August of that year. While the games were still ongoing, she remembered watching the gymnastics competition from her hospital room. But according to official records and her daughter's birth certificate, her child was born in August 2007, a full year before the Olympics actually took place. Now, here's where things get extremely creepy. These people didn't just misremember the year. They had specific detailed memories that included personal life events tied directly to watching the Olympics. A teacher from London named David Foster remembered organizing a classroom project where students tracked medal counts throughout the games in July 2007. He even claimed to have the project materials saved on his computer. But when he searched his files, he found similar projects from other years, but nothing from 2007. It was as if those memories existed in his mind but had been completely erased from physical reality. The details these people remembered were incredibly specific and often matched each other's accounts. Multiple individuals recalled the opening ceremony happening on July 7, 2007, at exactly 7 p.m., emphasizing the lucky number 7 theme. In our timeline, the Beijing Olympics opened on August 8, 2008 at 8 p.m., chosen for the lucky number 8 in Chinese culture. Think about that for a moment. These people remembered an entirely different numerological theme for the same event. Some skeptics argue that this is simply a case of false memory, that people confused the year or mixed up their personal timelines with the actual Olympic schedule. After all, human memory is notoriously unreliable, and it's easy to misplace events in time, especially several years after they occurred. But here's what makes that explanation difficult to accept. These individuals didn't just confuse one detail. They had complete, coherent memory structures built around the wrong date, with personal milestones and life events that, according to all physical evidence, happened at different times. There's also the question of why so many people independently remembered the exact same wrong date. If it were simply random memory errors, you'd expect people to misremember different years. Some might say 2006, others 2009. But the vast majority specifically remembered 2007, suggesting something more than coincidence. Some researchers who study consciousness and parallel realities believe this could be evidence of a timeline shift, a moment when reality itself changed and most people's memories were updated to match, but a small percentage retained memories from the original timeline. According to this theory, the Beijing Olympics may have actually occurred in 2007 in one version of reality, but at some point between then and 2012, something caused the timelines to merge or shift, placing the Olympics in 2008 instead. To this day, online, communities exist where people who remember the 2007 Olympics gather to share their experiences and compare notes. They call themselves the displaced, individuals who believe they've shifted from one timeline to another. So, what do you think? Could thousands of people across the world all have the exact same false memory by pure coincidence? Or is it possible that reality itself changed, and these people are the only ones who remember how things used to be? And if timelines can shift for something as major as the Olympics, what else might have changed that we simply don't remember? This case emerged in late 2021 and caused massive discussions across social media platforms before many of the posts were mysteriously deleted. A registered nurse named Catherine Woodward from Manchester, England, posted a detailed video describing how she went to sleep in March of 2020 and woke up in a world where the COVID-19 pandemic had never occurred. But here's what makes her story so chilling. She didn't just claim the pandemic was different or less severe. She described waking up to a reality where the virus was completely unknown, where people looked at her like she was insane when she mentioned lockdowns, vaccines, and mask mandates. She showed her nursing credentials, her work history from hospitals that, according to this timeline, were never converted to COVID wards, and most disturbingly, she presented medical records and photographs that showed her in protective equipment at overwhelmed hospitals. Except in this world, those events were documented as never having happened. Catherine was a 15-year veteran of the National Health Service, working in the intensive care unit at Royal Manchester Hospital. She had an impeccable professional record and no history of mental health issues or attention-seeking behavior. In her original video, which was viewed over 2 million times before being removed, she spoke calmly and methodically, like someone presenting medical evidence rather than making wild claims. She explained that she went to bed on March 23, 2020, exhausted after a grueling shift, treating COVID patients during the first wave of the pandemic in Britain. When she woke up the next morning, everything felt wrong. She turned on the news expecting updates about infection rates and lockdown measures, but instead found regular programming discussing politics, sports, and entertainment. No mention of a virus, no breaking news banners, nothing. Confused, she checked multiple news sources, searched online, and found absolutely no reference to COVID-19 anywhere. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the last 2 years of your life, the biggest global event in a century, had simply never happened. How would you even process that? Catherine immediately called her colleagues at the hospital. When she mentioned the pandemic, they responded with concern, asking if she was feeling all right. She rushed to work and found the hospital operating normally. No overflow tents outside, no emergency protocols, no protective equipment stations. The ICU, where she'd spent months treating critically ill patients, was being used for routine post-surgical care. When she asked the head nurse about the COVID unit, she was met with blank stares and suggestions that she take some personal time off. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Catherine went home and checked her phone for proof. She had hundreds of photos documenting her work during the pandemic. Pictures of herself in full PPE, exhausted selfies after double shifts, images of empty streets during lockdown. But when she showed these photos to her family and coworkers, they insisted the images must be from some kind of training exercise or disaster preparedness drill. The metadata on the photos confirmed they were taken in 2020, but nobody had any memory of the events they depicted. She also produced her employment records showing overtime hours, hazard pay, and shift schedules from the pandemic period. But when she checked with the hospital's Human Resources Department, those records showed normal working hours with no pandemic-related annotations. It was as if her personal documentation existed, but the world's collective memory and official records had been completely rewritten. Some skeptics suggested Catherine experienced a severe psychological break, perhaps brought on by the trauma of working through an actual pandemic. They argued she created an elaborate false reality where the pandemic didn't happen as a coping mechanism. But that explanation doesn't account for the physical evidence she possessed. photographs and documents that depicted events nobody else remembered. Others believe Catherine experienced something called quantum consciousness displacement, a theoretical phenomenon where an individual's awareness shifts from one parallel reality to another, while their physical body remains in the same location. According to this theory, Catherine's consciousness may have originated in a timeline where COVID-19 devastated the world, but somehow transferred to a nearly identical timeline where the pandemic never occurred. The most unsettling aspect of her story is what happened after she posted her video. Within 72 hours, all traces of it vanished from every platform where it had been shared. Catherine's social media accounts were deleted. People who claimed to have downloaded the video found their files corrupted or missing. And Catherine herself disappeared from public view, with some saying she was institutionalized, while others believe she simply deleted everything and went into hiding. To this day, only fragmented memories of her testimony exist in forum discussions and secondhand accounts. So, what really happened to Catherine Woodward? Did she shift from a pandemic timeline to one where humanity was spared? Or was she suffering from a delusion so convincing that she fabricated evidence to support it? And if she really did come from another reality, how many other people might be walking around right now carrying memories of events that never happened in this world? Before we continue, here's a quick question for you. If you could visit a parallel world where humanity made just one different choice, what historical event would you want to see changed? Go ahead and drop your answer down in the comments. We can't wait to see what you come up with. If you're enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Thank you so much. In 2006, a university student in Berlin named Henrik Nordstrom approached his history professor with a complaint that seemed utterly bizarre. He insisted the textbooks were completely wrong about how World War II ended, and he had clear, detailed memories of studying an entirely different outcome in his previous school. According to Henrik, in his memories, the war in Europe ended not in 1945, but in 1947, after a negotiated peace agreement that left Germany divided into 4 independent territories rather than 2. He described specific details about this alternate timeline, including the names of leaders who, in our world, never held those positions, peace treaties that were never signed, and a completely different Cold War dynamic that followed. His professor initially dismissed him as confused, but then Henrik did something that shocked everyone. He produced old-school notebooks, written in his own handwriting, filled with dates, names, and events that don't match any historical record, yet the paper, ink, and his handwriting were all verified as authentic. Henrik was a 21-year-old history major at Humboldt University, originally from Stockholm, Sweden. He had moved to Berlin to pursue his master's degree and had always been known as a meticulous, detail-oriented student with a genuine passion for World War II history. When he enrolled in Professor Klaus Richter's Advanced European History course, he expected to deepen his knowledge, not discover that everything he'd learned was somehow wrong. The confrontation happened during a lecture about the Yalta Conference and the division of Germany. Professor Richter was explaining how Germany was divided into East and West when Henrik raised his hand and politely corrected him, stating that Germany had actually been divided into 4 independent nations: the North German Republic, the South German Federation, the Rhineland State, and the Saxon Territory. When the professor corrected him, Henrik looked genuinely confused, insisting those were the official names he'd learned in school. Now, here's where things get extremely creepy. After class, Henrik brought 3 notebooks to Professor Richter's office. These weren't new notebooks with recently fabricated notes. They were worn, yellowed spiral notebooks with coffee stains, and creased pages clearly years old. Inside, written in blue ink that had faded over time, were detailed history notes from what appeared to be Henrik's high school education. The notes covered World War II extensively, but the timeline was completely wrong. According to Henrik's notebooks, Adolf Hitler didn't die in 1945. Instead, he fled to Argentina in early 1946 after Soviet forces captured Berlin, leaving behind a provisional government that negotiated the eventual peace treaty. The notes describe something called the Geneva Accord of 1947, where Allied powers and German representatives agreed to split Germany into 4 autonomous regions, each with its own government but under international oversight. Henrik's notes even included the names of the 4 regional chancellors, none of whom exist in any historical record. But wait, it gets even more fascinating. The notebooks also contained alternate details about the Cold War that followed. According to Henrik's notes, the Soviet Union never controlled East Germany as a single bloc. Instead, the Soviets had influence over the Saxon territory, while the Americans controlled the Rhineland. The British oversaw the north, and the French administered the south. He described a much more fragmented post-war Europe with different alliances and conflicts than what actually occurred. Professor Richter was stunned. He had the notebooks analyzed by forensic document experts at the university. The paper was confirmed to be from the early 2000s. The ink oxidation patterns were consistent with notes written several years prior, and handwriting analysts confirmed the writing matched Henrik's natural hand, with no signs of forgery or deliberate deception. These were genuine student notes, except they documented a version of history that never happened. Some skeptics argued that Henrik might have attended a school with a terrible history curriculum, or perhaps he'd been part of some experimental alternative history project and had confused it with real events. But Henrik produced his old-school transcripts from Stockholm, showing he'd received excellent marks in history from a reputable institution. He even contacted his former teachers, who confirmed they taught standard World War II history, nothing about a 4-way division of Germany. Others believe Henrik may have experienced a phenomenon quantum physicists call timeline convergence, where consciousness from one parallel reality briefly merges with a body in another. In this theory, Henrik's mind originated in a world where World War II ended differently, where Hitler escaped, where Germany was divided into 4 nations instead of 2. When his consciousness shifted to our timeline, his physical memories in the form of these notebooks somehow survived the transition. Think about this for a moment. If Henrik really did come from an alternate timeline, what does that mean for the concept of history itself? Are there infinite variations of our past playing out across parallel worlds? And occasionally, do people slip between them, carrying memories and evidence of events that never occurred here? To this day, Henrik maintains that his memories are real, that he studied this version of history in school, and that he has no explanation for why the world's records don't match his notes. The notebooks are now stored at Humboldt University as part of an ongoing study into false memories and historical perception. So, what do you think? Could Henrik have genuinely shifted from a parallel world with a different history? Or is there a rational explanation for why a bright history student would have detailed notes about events that never happened? And if he really did come from another timeline, how many other people are walking around with memories of a different past? This might sound absolutely insane, but there's a growing community of people online who claim they have vivid memories of New Zealand being in a completely different location, or in some cases, not existing at all. In 2015, a woman named Fiona Reid from Scotland posted a now viral video where she described her shock upon looking at a map and seeing New Zealand positioned to the southeast of Australia. According to her memories, New Zealand was located northeast of Australia, much closer to the equator, with a warmer, more tropical climate. But the case gets even stranger when dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of other people began commenting that they remembered the same thing. Or, even more bizarrely, that they had no memory of New Zealand existing at all. These weren't people confusing geography or misremembering a childhood lesson. Many were teachers, pilots, travel agents, and even some who claimed to have visited New Zealand in their original timeline, but in a completely different location than where it sits on maps today. Fiona Reid was a 43-year-old geography teacher with over 20 years of experience. She had taught world geography to hundreds of students and considered herself extremely knowledgeable about global maps. In her video, which has been viewed millions of times, she explains that she was helping her daughter with homework when she glanced at a world map and felt her blood run cold. New Zealand was in the wrong place. She describes the moment as feeling like reality itself had shifted beneath her feet. According to Fiona's memories, New Zealand sat much further north, positioned above Australia rather than below and to the east. She remembered teaching students that New Zealand had a warm, tropical climate similar to Fiji or Samoa because of its equatorial proximity. She even recalled specific lesson plans where she compared New Zealand's climate to other Pacific islands. But when she looked at the map that night, New Zealand was positioned far to the southeast, in much colder waters, with a temperate climate that matched its actual geographic location. Now, here's where it gets extremely creepy. Within hours of posting her video, Fiona's comment section exploded with people sharing nearly identical experiences. A commercial pilot named James Whitmore from Australia commented that he distinctly remembered flight paths to New Zealand going northeast from Sydney, not southeast. He even described the approximate flight time being shorter because of the northern route. But when he checked his airline's current flight paths, they all went southeast, exactly where New Zealand actually sits on the map. A travel agent named Patricia Dominguez from Spain shared that she remembered booking tropical beach vacations to New Zealand for clients in the early 2000s, marketing it as a warm weather destination. She said she had brochures and promotional materials describing New Zealand's tropical paradise beaches, but when she searched her old files, she found materials describing New Zealand's beautiful but temperate climate, with no mention of tropical weather. But then something even more bizarre emerged. Hundreds of people began commenting that they had no memory of New Zealand existing at all. These individuals claimed that, in their original timeline, Australia was the only major landmass in that region of the Pacific. One commenter, a retired schoolteacher named Margaret Chen from Canada, said she taught geography for 35 years and never once mentioned New Zealand because it didn't exist. She remembered students asking if there were any other countries near Australia, and her always answering no, just smaller island nations. Some skeptics argue this is simply a case of poor geography education or confused memories. After all, maps can be misleading depending on their projection, and it's easy to misremember exact locations of distant countries. But how do you explain professional pilots, geography teachers, and travel agents all misremembering the same basic geographic facts? These are people whose careers literally depend on knowing where countries are located. There's also the question of the climate confusion. Fiona and others remember New Zealand having tropical weather, which would only make sense if it were positioned much closer to the equator. You can't just misremember an entire country's climate system. Either it's tropical or it's temperate. There's no middle ground. Some researchers believe this could be evidence of what they call the geographic shift phenomenon, where certain locations in parallel timelines occupy different positions. According to this theory, tectonic and geologic history might have unfolded differently in alternate realities, placing the same landmasses in different locations. If someone shifts from one of these parallel worlds to ours, they would carry memories of New Zealand being somewhere else entirely. Others point to something called collective false memory, where groups of people somehow develop identical, incorrect memories about the same event or fact. But that explanation doesn't account for why these false memories are so specific, and why they're shared by people in different countries who have never met. To this day, online forums dedicated to this phenomenon continue to grow, with new people discovering the geographic discrepancy every week. Many describe the same feeling Fiona had: a sudden, unsettling realization that the map is wrong, followed by the horrifying discovery that everyone else insists it's always been this way. So, what do you think? Are thousands of people across the world simply confused about basic geography? Or could they be remembering a different version of Earth, one where New Zealand occupied a completely different position? And if geography can change between timelines, what else might be different that we simply haven't noticed yet? In 2017, a music journalist named Charlotte Hayes from Liverpool posted an article that was quickly removed from every platform where it appeared. She claimed that she woke up one morning to discover that the Beatles, the most famous band in history, were completely unknown in this version of reality. According to Charlotte, in her original world, she had spent years writing about music history, but the Beatles didn't exist there. Instead, a band called the Quarrymen had achieved moderate success but never became a cultural phenomenon. When she woke up in this timeline, she was shocked to find her bookshelves filled with Beatles albums she didn't remember owning, posters on her walls she didn't remember hanging, and articles in her portfolio about a band she had no memory of ever hearing about. The truly unsettling part? She found old emails on her computer where she discussed the Beatles with colleagues, conversations she has absolutely no memory of having. Charlotte was a 38-year-old music journalist who had been writing about British rock history for over 15 years. She was born and raised in Liverpool, literally walking the same streets where the Beatles once performed in our timeline. Her entire career was built on documenting the evolution of British music from the 1950s onward. Think about how impossible it would be for a Liverpool music journalist to not know about the most famous band ever to come from that city. Yet that's exactly what Charlotte claimed happened to her. On the morning of September 14th, 2017, Charlotte woke up feeling disoriented, as if something fundamental had changed, but she couldn't quite identify what. She made coffee, sat down at her desk to work, and glanced at her bookshelf. That's when she saw them. Dozens of albums with covers showing four young men from Liverpool: Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Revolver, The White Album. She had absolutely no memory of these albums or the band that created them. Confused, Charlotte pulled one of the albums from the shelf. Beatles. She'd never heard that name before. She turned on her computer and searched for them, and what she found absolutely shocked her. According to the internet, the Beatles were the most influential band in music history, credited with revolutionizing popular music in the 1960s. They'd sold over 600 million records worldwide. They were from Liverpool, her hometown, and had performed at the Cavern Club, a venue she'd written about extensively. How could she not know this? Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Charlotte checked her own published articles online. She found dozens of pieces she'd written about the Beatles, analyzing their musical evolution, their cultural impact, their influence on modern rock. Articles with her byline, her writing style, her analytical approach. But she had no memory of writing any of them. It was as if someone had inserted false memories into the historical record, except these memories existed in documents and databases, but not in her mind. She opened her email archives and discovered years of correspondence with editors and colleagues discussing Beatles-related projects. She found emails where she pitched article ideas about the Beatles, where she debated their ranking among other British invasion bands, where she arranged interviews with people who claimed to have seen them perform. Charlotte says she read these emails with growing horror, recognizing her own writing style, but having absolutely no recollection of sending them. But wait, there's something even more fascinating about her story. Charlotte specifically mentioned that, in her original timeline, the Quarrymen existed as a moderately successful skiffle band from Liverpool that never achieved mainstream fame. Here's what makes that detail so intriguing. In our timeline, the Quarrymen was actually the name of John Lennon's original band before they evolved into the Beatles. It's like Charlotte remembered the seed, but not the flower that grew from it. Some skeptics argue that Charlotte might have experienced a severe form of selective amnesia, perhaps triggered by stress or trauma, that specifically erased her memories of the Beatles while leaving everything else intact. But that explanation seems incredibly unlikely. How could someone forget the most famous band in history while retaining detailed knowledge of every other aspect of music history? And how would that explain the physical evidence in her home, albums and posters she claims she never purchased? Others suggest she might have experienced what psychologists call confabulation, where the brain creates false memories to fill gaps. But Charlotte isn't claiming to remember something that didn't happen. She's claiming to not remember something that everyone else says definitely did happen. That's the opposite of confabulation. There's a theory among researchers who study parallel timelines that cultural history might be one of the most variable elements between realities. Small changes in early decisions could lead to massively different cultural outcomes. What if in Charlotte's original timeline, John Lennon and Paul McCartney never met at that church fete in 1957? What if the Quarrymen never evolved into the Beatles, and British rock history took a completely different path? To this day, Charlotte maintains her story. Though most of her online presence has been scrubbed clean, a few forum discussions and archive comments are all that remain of her original article. So, what do you think? Could a music journalist from Liverpool really have shifted from a timeline where the most famous band in history never existed? Or is there a psychological explanation for why someone would have detailed professional work about a band they claim to have never heard of? And if the Beatles' existence can differ between timelines, what other cultural touchstones might be unique to our specific version of reality? If you already have chills, now, hold on, because this case is absolutely extraordinary. In October of 2003, a man was found wandering through the streets of Tokyo wearing clothing from the early 1980s, carrying currency that had been out of circulation for over 20 years, and insisting that he had just left his office the day before. The man identified himself as Yoshi Nakamura, a 32-year-old banker who worked in Tokyo's financial district. But here's where it gets truly mysterious. When police investigated his story, they discovered that a man named Yoshi Nakamura had indeed disappeared in 1981 at the age of 32 while walking home from work. 22 years had passed in our world, but for him, it had been only one night. Medical examinations showed that his body matched the age he claimed to be, not 54, which he should have been if he'd lived through those missing decades. The man was discovered at approximately 7 in the morning near Shimbashi Station by a shopkeeper who noticed him, standing motionless on the sidewalk, staring up at the modern buildings with a look of complete confusion. He was wearing a brown polyester suit with wide lapels, a style that had been popular in the early 80s but looked distinctly out of place in 2003. His briefcase was a vintage leather model, and when police examined its contents, they found business documents dated October 9th, 1981, a calculator from that era, and several thousand yen in old currency notes. When officers approached him, Nakamura seemed disoriented but coherent. He kept asking what had happened to the city, why everything looked so different, and where all the cars he recognized had gone. He pulled out his wallet and showed them his identification card, which confirmed his name and listed his birth date as April 16, 1949. That would make him 32 years old in 1981, but 54 in 2003. Yet the man standing before them looked no older than his early 30s. Now, here's where it gets extremely creepy. Police ran his information through their database and discovered that a missing person report had been filed in November of 1981 for a man matching this exact description. Yoshi Nakamura, a banker at Mitsubishi Bank, had disappeared while walking home from his office on October 9th of that year. He'd left work at his usual time, around 6:30 in the evening, and was never seen again. His wife had reported him missing the next day, and despite an extensive investigation, absolutely no trace of him was ever found. Police contacted the family from the original missing person report. Nakamura's wife, now in her 70s and remarried, was brought to the station. When she saw him, she reportedly went pale and began to cry. She confirmed it was her first husband, but he looked exactly as he had the night he disappeared 22 years earlier. She had aged more than 2 decades. He had not aged a single day. Imagine that moment. Your husband who vanished in 1981 suddenly reappears, unchanged, while you've lived an entire lifetime without him. Medical examinations were conducted at Tokyo University Hospital. Doctors were absolutely baffled by the results. His physical condition, bone density, organ function, and cellular aging all indicated a man in his early 30s, not his mid-50s. His dental work matched records from 1981, with no additional work or natural aging progression. Even his hair showed no signs of graying that would be expected in someone his chronological age. But wait, there's something even more fascinating. When questioned about the 22 missing years, Nakamura insisted that no time had passed at all. He remembered leaving his office on October 9th, 1981, walking toward the train station as he did every evening. He described feeling suddenly dizzy, seeing a strange bright light, and then finding himself on an unfamiliar street corner in what appeared to be a completely different version of Tokyo. Some skeptics argued this could be an elaborate hoax, perhaps involving plastic surgery and falsified documents. But medical experts confirmed there was no evidence of cosmetic procedures, and the old currency he carried was verified as authentic with serial numbers matching bills printed in the early 1980s. The business documents in his briefcase were examined by forensic specialists who confirmed the paper, ink, and printing methods were all consistent with 1981. Others suggested Nakamura might have been in some kind of coma or suspended animation for 22 years. But where? How? There were no records of any medical facility keeping an unidentified patient for that length of time, and his physical condition showed no signs of muscle atrophy or other effects associated with prolonged unconsciousness. There's a theory among theoretical physicists about what they call temporal displacement, where an individual becomes unstuck in time and jumps forward or backward to a different point in the timeline. Some believe this could happen at locations where Earth's magnetic field interacts with unusual energy patterns. Tokyo sits on multiple fault lines and experiences significant seismic activity. Could the right combination of electromagnetic forces have created a temporary rift in time? To this day, the case remains officially unexplained. Nakamura spent several months in psychiatric evaluation before being released. He struggled to adapt to a world that had moved on without him, where his wife had remarried, his children had grown up without him, and technology had advanced beyond anything he remembered. So, what really happened on that October evening in 1981? Did Yoshi Nakamura somehow slip through time itself? Or is there a rational explanation that accounts for a man who disappeared for 22 years without aging a single day? This case emerged in 2016 and caused intense debate across the internet. A structural engineer named David Feldman from New York posted a video where he described his absolute horror at discovering that in this world, the World Trade Center towers were destroyed in 2001. According to David, in his original timeline, the September 11th attacks never happened. He described going to sleep on September 10th, 2016, in a world where the Twin Towers still dominated the Manhattan skyline, where the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan unfolded completely differently, and where the entire trajectory of the 21st century followed another path. When he woke up on September 11th, 2016, 15 years to the day after the attacks in our timeline, he found himself in a world where those towers had been gone for a decade and a half. He showed photographs from his phone of the Twin Towers standing in 2015 and 2016, except every piece of metadata confirmed the images were taken long after the towers fell in our reality. David Feldman was a 47-year-old structural engineer who had worked in New York City for over 20 years. He specialized in high-rise construction and had intimate knowledge of Manhattan's skyline. His credentials were impeccable, with a degree from MIT and a career spent analyzing the structural integrity of some of the city's most iconic buildings. This wasn't someone prone to confusion or flights of fancy. This was a professional who understood architecture and urban planning better than most. On the morning of September 11th, 2016, David woke up in his apartment in Brooklyn and immediately felt that something was profoundly wrong. He looked out his window toward Manhattan, and the skyline looked different, incomplete. He couldn't quite place what was missing until he focused on Lower Manhattan. The Twin Towers weren't there. He grabbed his phone, searched for the World Trade Center, and what he found absolutely devastated him. According to everything he read, terrorists had hijacked 4 planes on September 11th, 2001, and flew 2 of them into the Twin Towers, killing nearly 3,000 people. David had no memory of this event, none whatsoever. In his timeline, September 11th, 2001, had been an ordinary Tuesday. He remembered that day clearly because it was his daughter's 8th birthday, and he'd taken time off work to celebrate with her. No attacks, no tragedy, no war on terror that followed. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. David opened his photo gallery and found pictures he'd taken of the Twin Towers as recently as 2 weeks earlier. He'd photographed them during a worksite visit to Lower Manhattan in late August 2016. The images clearly showed both towers standing, gleaming, in the sunlight. But when he checked the news and searched online, every source confirmed the towers had been destroyed 15 years ago. How could he have photographs of buildings that had been gone for over a decade? Digital forensics experts examined David's phone at his insistence. The metadata on the photographs confirmed they were taken with his iPhone in August and September of 2016. The GPS coordinates placed him in Lower Manhattan. The timestamps were accurate. There were no signs of digital manipulation, no evidence of photoshopping, no indication that these images were anything other than genuine photographs taken exactly when the data said they were taken. Pretty insane, right? But wait, there's something even more fascinating about David's testimony. He didn't just claim the September 11th attacks never happened. He described an entirely different 21st century. In his timeline, the United States never invaded Iraq in 2003. Afghanistan remained a minor geopolitical issue rather than the site of a 20-year war. Airport security remained relatively relaxed. The Department of Homeland Security didn't exist. The entire post-9/11 security state that defined our early 21st century had never developed in his world. David also noticed personal differences. He described calling his daughter, now in her 20s, and having a conversation that felt slightly off. She mentioned memories of fear and anxiety from childhood that he didn't recall. She talked about school lockdown drills and heightened security that seemed completely foreign to him. It was as if she'd lived through a collective trauma that he had no memory of experiencing. Some skeptics argued that David might have experienced a severe dissociative episode, a psychological break where he constructed an elaborate alternate reality. But that doesn't explain the photographs. You can't have a mental health crisis that produces genuine digital images complete with accurate metadata. Others suggested it was an extremely sophisticated hoax, but digital forensics found no evidence of manipulation. There's a theory among quantum physicists about branching timelines, moments when major historical events create splits in reality. Some believe that September 11th, 2001 was such a pivotal moment that it created multiple timeline branches. In one branch, our timeline, the attacks occurred and shaped the next 2 decades. In another branch, perhaps security measures prevented the attacks, or the terrorists were stopped, or any number of small changes led to a completely different outcome. Think about this for a moment. If David really did shift from a parallel timeline on the exact anniversary of September 11th, 15 years after the divergence point, was that timing coincidental? Or do timeline shifts happen more easily on significant dates, moments when the barrier between realities becomes thin? To this day, David maintains his story despite the obvious sensitivity of the subject. He still has the photographs on his phone, images that, according to our history, should be impossible. So, what really happened? Did David Feldman wake up in a different version of reality, one where a tragedy that shaped our entire century never occurred? Or is there a rational explanation for how a structural engineer could have contemporary photographs of buildings that were destroyed 15 years ago? And if he really did come from another timeline, how many other people are carrying memories of a world where history unfolded very differently? Are you ready for an escalation? Then pay close attention now, because this case challenges everything we understand about geography and reality. In 2018, a maritime navigator named Douglas Pemberton claimed that the Australia he remembered from his original timeline was not a single continent, but an archipelago of 7 large islands, with significant water passages between them. Douglas worked for an international shipping company and had sailed these waters for over 20 years in his original reality. He produced detailed navigational charts showing these passages, maritime routes that don't exist on any modern map, and even logbooks documenting journeys through waterways that, in our world, are solid land. When cartographers examined his charts, they found them to be professionally drawn with accurate coordinates. Except the landmasses were completely different. Some researchers believe Douglas somehow shifted from a timeline where the geological history of Australia unfolded differently, where the continent never fully connected, leaving it as a scattered chain of islands. Douglas Pemberton was a 53-year-old senior maritime navigator with over 30 years of experience at sea. He held advanced certifications in navigation and had worked for Maersk, one of the world's largest shipping companies, for most of his career. His job literally depended on knowing exact geographic coordinates, ocean depths, and maritime routes. This wasn't someone who could be confused about whether a continent was solid or divided by water. His entire professional life was built on precision. The realization came to him in March of 2018, while he was planning a shipping route from Singapore to Sydney. He pulled up modern navigational charts and felt his blood run cold. The route showed the ship sailing around the southern coast of a single, unbroken landmass. But in his memory, that route didn't exist, because there was a major waterway cutting through what should have been solid land. He remembered the Central Passage, a shipping channel that ran north to south through the middle of the continent, separating what he called Western Australia from the Central Australian Islands. Douglas immediately pulled out his personal navigational archives, charts, and logbooks he'd kept from decades of sailing. What he found was absolutely extraordinary. He had detailed charts showing Australia divided into 7 distinct islands. The largest, which he called Greater Western Australia, occupied roughly the same position as Western Australia in our world. But instead of connecting to the rest of the continent, it was separated by water from the Central Australian Islands, 3 medium-sized landmasses in the interior. Then came the Eastern Australian Islands, which included what we know as Queensland, New South Wales, and Victoria, but again, separated by navigable waterways. Now, here's where it gets extremely creepy. Douglas's charts weren't rough sketches or vague drawings. They were professional-grade navigational maps with precise coordinates, depth soundings, current patterns, and hazard markings. He had calculated tide tables for the passages between islands. He had marked shipping lanes that had been used for decades. He even had notes about specific ports on these islands, cities that in our world sit hundreds of miles inland, but in his charts were coastal harbors. His logbooks were even more detailed. Entry after entry documented voyages through passages that don't exist in our reality. On July 15, 1997, he recorded sailing through the Central Passage from north to south, noting water depths of between 200 and 300 meters. On March 3, 2004, he documented navigating the Eastern Strait, a waterway separating what we call Victoria from New South Wales. These weren't fantasy journals. They were professional maritime logs with technical data, weather observations, and mechanical notes about the ships he was navigating. But wait, there's something even more fascinating. Douglas contacted the Australian Bureau of Meteorology and asked about weather patterns in the Central Passage region. When they told him no such passage existed, he produced weather data from his own records showing completely different climate patterns. The interior of Australia, which in our world is arid desert, was in his charts influenced by ocean currents flowing through the central waterways, creating a more humid, temperate climate in regions that are now bone dry. Cartographers and geologists examined his materials with intense skepticism, but they couldn't find any obvious errors or inconsistencies within his system. The charts were internally coherent, with accurate mathematical relationships between coordinates, distances, and scales. One geologist noted that if Australia's tectonic history had unfolded differently, if certain geological uplifts had never occurred, it's theoretically possible the continent could have remained as separate islands. Some skeptics argue that Douglas created an elaborate alternate geography as part of a fiction project or role-playing game that he eventually confused with reality. But that doesn't explain why a professional navigator with decades of experience would spend years creating false logbooks with detailed technical data. Others suggest he might have suffered from a specific type of false memory disorder, but memory disorders don't produce professionally drawn navigational charts with mathematically accurate coordinate systems. There's a theory among geophysicists that, in parallel timelines, Earth's geological history might have unfolded very differently. Continental drift, volcanic activity, sea level changes, all of these could have followed alternate paths. If Douglas somehow shifted from a timeline where Australia never fully connected into a single landmass, he would remember an entirely different geography backed by decades of professional maritime experience. Think about this for a moment. Douglas didn't just misremember a small detail. He had an entire alternate geographic understanding of an entire continent, complete with professional documentation spanning 20 years. That's not a simple memory error. That's a coherent alternate reality. To this day, Douglas maintains his navigational archives as proof that he came from somewhere else. He's even offered to submit to any testing that might validate his claims. So, what do you think? Could a professional navigator really have shifted from a timeline where Australia's geology was completely different? Or is there a rational explanation for why someone would have decades of detailed maritime records documenting passages through solid land? And if continents can have different shapes in different timelines, what does that say about the nature of physical reality itself? This case is by far one of the most scientifically fascinating on this list, and once you've heard it, you'll understand why it has physicists and quantum theorists still debating today. In 2014, a physics professor named Dr. Elena Volkov claimed that she shifted from a reality where Albert Einstein died as a young child and never developed his theories of relativity. In her original world, she explained, physics took a completely different path. Quantum mechanics was discovered decades earlier. Nuclear energy was developed through different principles, and the atomic bomb was never created because the underlying theory didn't exist. Dr. Volkov produced research papers written in her own hand with alternative physics equations that some scientists admit are mathematically consistent, but describe a different set of physical laws. When she arrived in this timeline, she said she had to relearn everything because the fundamental understanding of space, time, and energy was completely different from what she'd studied her entire career. Dr. Elena Volkov was a 46-year-old theoretical physicist teaching at Moscow State University. She had earned her doctorate from Cambridge and published over 30 peer-reviewed papers on quantum field theory. Her credentials were impeccable, and colleagues described her as brilliant, meticulous, and absolutely not someone prone to delusions or fantasy. This was a woman who had dedicated her entire life to understanding the fundamental laws of the universe. The shift happened on January 23, 2014. Elena described waking up that morning and going to teach her graduate seminar on advanced relativity. But when she began writing equations on the board, equations she'd written hundreds of times before, students looked at her with complete confusion. They told her the formulas were wrong, that they didn't match Einstein's work. Elena was baffled. She'd been teaching these principles for over 20 years. How could Einstein's equations suddenly be different? During her lunch break, she went to the university library and pulled up Einstein's original papers. What she read absolutely shocked her. The theories were completely different from what she remembered. The famous equation E equals mc squared, which in her memory had been developed by a physicist named Hermann Weyl in the 1930s using quantum principles, was attributed to Einstein and derived from special relativity in 1905. Think about that for a moment. The most famous equation in physics, and she remembered it having a completely different origin and derivation. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Elena went home and retrieved her personal research archives, notebooks, and papers she'd written throughout her career. What she found was extraordinary. Pages and pages of equations describing physical laws that didn't match the physics in our timeline. She had derived formulas for gravitational effects using quantum wave functions rather than space-time curvature. She had calculations for nuclear energy based on something she called harmonic binding principles rather than mass energy equivalence. But wait, there's something even more fascinating. Elena brought these papers to several colleagues, asking them to verify the mathematics. While the physicists insisted her underlying premises were wrong, several admitted that the mathematical framework was internally consistent. The equations worked within their own logical system. One colleague noted that her formulas produced accurate predictions for certain quantum phenomena, just arriving at them through completely different theoretical pathways. Elena also described fundamental differences in how technology had developed in her original timeline. Without Einstein's relativity, she explained, GPS satellites were never built because the theory accounting for time dilation didn't exist. Nuclear weapons were never developed because the mass-energy relationship was understood differently. Space travel had progressed more slowly because gravitational calculations were based on quantum models rather than general relativity. She even claimed that in her world, World War II ended differently because the Manhattan Project never existed. Without the theoretical framework for atomic bombs, the war in the Pacific continued into 1946 and ended through conventional warfare. Pretty insane, right? An entire alternate history of the 20th century branching from one person's absence. Some skeptics argue that Elena might have developed a comprehensive alternate physics framework as a thought experiment and somehow convinced herself it was real. But that doesn't explain why multiple physicists confirmed her equations were mathematically valid, even if based on different premises. Creating a completely consistent alternate physics that produces accurate predictions isn't something someone does by accident. Others suggest she might have suffered from a specific type of delusional disorder, where false memories become incredibly detailed and systematic. But Elena showed no other signs of mental illness. She functioned normally in every other aspect of her life. Only her memories of fundamental physics were different. There's a theory among quantum mechanics researchers about the observer effect at the most fundamental level. Some believe that in parallel universes, not just history but the actual laws of physics might vary slightly. If consciousness can shift between these realities, someone like Elena would carry knowledge of entirely different physical principles that in her original universe were just as valid as ours are here. Think about the implications. If the fundamental laws of physics can be different in parallel timelines, then reality itself is far more flexible than we ever imagined. Elena claims she's slowly adapted to this timeline's physics, but she still has her original research papers, documents that describe a universe operating under different rules. To this day, Elena teaches physics in Moscow, though she's notably quiet about her experience after facing significant professional skepticism. Her alternate physics papers remain in private archives, examined occasionally by curious researchers. So, what do you think? Could a physicist really have shifted from a timeline where the entire foundation of modern physics developed differently? Or is there a rational explanation for why someone would have decades of research based on equations that work mathematically but describe a different universe? And if physical laws can vary between timelines, what does that mean for our understanding of reality itself? And this is nothing compared to what you're about to hear. This case actually gave rise to the entire concept of the Mandela effect, the phenomenon where large groups of people remember historical events differently than the official record. In the early 2000s, a woman named Fiona Broome attended a conference where she casually mentioned her memories of Nelson Mandela dying in a South African prison in the 1980s. She clearly remembered news reports of his death, the public mourning, and even parts of his funeral broadcast on television. But of course, Nelson Mandela didn't die. In the 1980s, he was released from prison in 1990, became South Africa's president, and lived until 2013. When Fiona mentioned her memories at the conference, dozens of other people came forward with the exact same recollection. They didn't just misremember a date. They had full detailed memories of a historical event that never happened in this timeline, as if they had shifted here from a world where Mandela's story ended very differently. Fiona Broome was a paranormal researcher and consultant attending a DragonCon conference in Atlanta sometime around 2009. During a casual conversation about famous historical figures, she mentioned being shocked to learn that Nelson Mandela was still alive. She'd been certain he'd died in prison years earlier. She specifically remembered seeing news footage of his funeral, watching people mourning in the streets of South Africa, and even recalled hearing his widow speak at a memorial service. Imagine discovering that a major historical figure you clearly remember dying actually lived for decades longer. What happened next was absolutely extraordinary. As soon as Fiona mentioned her memory, several other conference attendees immediately said they remembered exactly the same thing. Not similar memories or vague recollections, but the exact same event. They too remembered Mandela dying in prison in the 80s. They remembered the news coverage, the international reaction, the sense that a great leader had died before seeing his country's freedom. One person even described remembering a specific news anchor announcing his death. Now, here's where it gets extremely creepy. After the conference, Fiona started researching this phenomenon online. She created a website where people could share their experiences of remembering history differently. Within months, hundreds of people came forward with detailed memories of Mandela's prison death. They described remembering it happening sometime between 1985 and 1991. Many recalled the date being tied to the continuing apartheid struggle, with Mandela dying as a symbol of resistance before ever tasting freedom. But wait, there's something even more fascinating about these memories. People didn't just remember a simple announcement of death. They had layered, detailed recollections. Some remembered where they were when they heard the news. Others described conversations with family members about what his death meant for South Africa's future. Several people even claimed to remember reading obituaries or seeing tribute specials on television. These weren't vague impressions. These were fully formed memories with emotional weight and contextual details. The phenomenon spread rapidly across the internet. People started reporting similar experiences with other historical events and facts. They remembered movie quotes differently, recalled company logos looking different, remembered books and shows with alternate titles. But the Mandela memory remained the most striking because it involved such a significant historical figure and such a specific detailed event that supposedly never occurred. Some skeptics argue this is simply a case of collective false memory, perhaps triggered by confusion between different South African anti-apartheid leaders who did die during the struggle. Steve Biko, for instance, died in police custody in 1977, and his death received international attention. Maybe people conflated different historical figures and events, creating a false composite memory of Mandela's death. Others suggest it could be the result of misinformation spread through media in the 80s and 90s. Perhaps incorrect news reports or fictional dramatizations created false memories that multiple people absorbed and later recalled as real events. But that explanation struggles to account for why these memories are so specific and consistent across hundreds of people who had no contact with each other. There's a theory among those who study parallel realities that the Mandela effect might be evidence of timeline shifts or merges. According to this idea, these people genuinely did experience Mandela dying in prison, but in a parallel timeline. At some point, either they shifted to our timeline where Mandela lived, or the timelines themselves merged, updating most people's memories but leaving some with recollections of the original version. Think about that for a moment. What if these aren't false memories at all, but real memories from another version of history? Some researchers even speculate about specific dates when these supposed shifts might have occurred. Many people report the discrepancy seeming to appear around 2010, though they insist their memories of Mandela's death date back decades earlier. Could something have happened around that time that caused realities to converge? To this day, thousands of people maintain they clearly remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison. Online communities dedicated to the Mandela effect continue to catalog these experiences, comparing notes and looking for patterns. Fiona Broom's original website sparked a global conversation about the nature of memory and reality that continues over a decade later. So, what do you think? Are thousands of people around the world simply experiencing the same false memory through some psychological phenomenon we don't fully understand? Or is it possible that these people genuinely shifted from a timeline where history unfolded differently, where Nelson Mandela's story ended in tragedy rather than triumph? And if major historical events can differ between timelines, how many other memories might we be carrying from realities that no longer exist? This case is definitely going to surprise you, and it connects military history, geopolitics, and one of the most captivating mysteries ever documented. In 2009, a man in military uniform walked into the Russian consulate in London, claiming he was a Soviet army officer who had been displaced from his timeline. He carried identification papers from the USSR, spoke with an accent that linguists confirmed was consistent with Soviet-era Russian, and insisted that in his world, the Soviet Union never collapsed in 1991. According to his story, he had fallen asleep in his barracks in Moscow in 2008, in a world where the Cold War continued into the 21st century, where the Soviet Union remained a superpower, and where the entire political map of Europe and Asia was dramatically different. When he woke up, he found himself in a reality where his country no longer existed, where the red flag with hammer and sickle had been replaced decades ago, and where his entire life, his career, his identity had been erased from history. The man identified himself as Captain Dmitry Volkov, a 34-year-old officer in the Soviet Army's Strategic Rocket Forces. He walked into the Russian consulate on Bayswater Road on the morning of March 12, 2009, wearing a military uniform that consulate staff immediately recognized as Soviet-era, but in pristine condition, as if it had been issued recently. He was calm, articulate, and absolutely insisted he needed to speak with Soviet officials about a critical security matter. When staff tried to explain that the Soviet Union no longer existed, he looked at them as if they were insane. Consulate security detained him and called in specialists to evaluate his mental state. But what they found was deeply unsettling. Volkov carried a Soviet military identification card that appeared authentic, complete with official seals, stamps, and security features. He had Soviet rubles in his wallet, paper currency that had been discontinued in the early 1990s. He also carried orders dated February 28, 2008, assigning him to a training exercise in Belarus, except the orders were written on official Soviet military letterhead that shouldn't have existed for nearly 2 decades. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. When linguists and cultural experts interviewed Volkov, they confirmed his accent and speech patterns were consistent with someone who had grown up in the Soviet system. He used Soviet-era terminology, referred to cities by their Soviet names rather than their modern names, and spoke about contemporary politics in terms that only made sense if the USSR still existed. He described Mikhail Gorbachev as a historical figure from the 1980s, claiming he'd been replaced by a succession of general secretaries who maintained Soviet power through economic reforms. Volkov's description of his world was extraordinarily detailed. He explained that in his timeline, the Soviet reforms of the late 80s never led to collapse. Instead, the USSR adapted to economic pressures while maintaining its political structure. The Warsaw Pact still existed. The Berlin Wall had come down, but Germany was reunified under a neutral status that both NATO and the Soviet Union could accept. The Cold War had evolved into a different kind of tension, less about nuclear confrontation and more about economic competition and proxy conflicts. But wait, there's something even more fascinating? Volkov described technological differences in his world. Without the economic collapse of the 90s, Soviet space programs had continued to advance. He claimed the USSR had established a permanent moon base in the late 90s and was planning a Mars mission. Consumer technology had developed differently, with Soviet computer systems competing globally rather than being eclipsed by Western companies. Pretty insane, right? An entire alternate technological and political history stemming from one different outcome. Think about this for a moment. Volkov didn't just claim a minor, historical difference. He described waking up in a world where his entire country, the superpower that defined his identity, had vanished nearly 20 years earlier. Imagine going to sleep as a citizen of a powerful nation and waking up to find that nation had ceased to exist decades ago while you somehow remained unchanged. British intelligence became involved in the case. They examined his documents and found them disturbingly authentic. The paper stock matched Soviet military documentation from the 1980s and 90s. The printing techniques, ink composition, and security features were all consistent with genuine Soviet materials, but the dates were impossible. These documents claimed to be from 2008, nearly 2 decades after the Soviet Union collapsed. Some skeptics argued Volkov was a performance artist or an intelligence operative conducting some kind of elaborate psychological operation. But to what end? His story brought him nothing but detention and psychiatric evaluation. Others suggested he might be suffering from a dissociative disorder where he'd constructed an elaborate false reality based on Soviet nostalgia. There's a theory among researchers who study parallel timelines that major geopolitical events create significant branching points in history. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was one of the defining moments of the 20th century. Some believe that in parallel realities, different decisions by Soviet leaders could have led to completely different outcomes. If Volkov somehow shifted from one of these timelines, he would carry memories and documentation of a world that diverged from ours nearly 2 decades earlier. To this day, no one knows what happened to Captain Dmitry Volkov. After several weeks of evaluation and questioning, he was quietly released and reportedly disappeared. Some say he returned to Russia, others claim he simply vanished. His Soviet documents were confiscated and classified, with British authorities never publicly commenting on their authenticity. So, what really happened? Could Volkov genuinely have shifted from a timeline where one of history's most significant events never occurred? Or is there a rational explanation for a man carrying seemingly authentic Soviet military documentation from 2008? And if the Soviet Union can still exist in parallel timelines, what other major historical turning points might have gone differently in realities we can't access? Ready for the finale? Then prepare yourself, because this case is by far the most unsettling and unexplainable incident ever connected to parallel timelines. In 2020, a woman named Jennifer Clarkson from Portland, Oregon, was sorting through old family photographs when she discovered something that made her blood run cold. It was a family portrait from her childhood, showing her, her parents, and her younger brother. But here's the problem. Jennifer doesn't have a younger brother and never has. When she showed the photograph to her parents, they looked at it in stunned silence before insisting it must be fake, that someone had edited it. But when the photo was professionally analyzed, experts confirmed it was an authentic print from the 1990s with no signs of digital manipulation. The boy in the photograph looked like a natural member of the family, shared physical features with Jennifer's parents, and was wearing clothing that matched their style from that era. Jennifer began having fragmented memories of this brother, playing with him as children, arguing over toys, memories that felt real but that everyone else insisted never happened. The most chilling detail? She found other photographs of this brother, dozens of them, scattered throughout her family's photo albums, documenting a childhood with a sibling who, according to everyone including her own parents, never existed at all. Jennifer Clarkson was a 38-year-old graphic designer who had returned to her childhood home in Portland during the COVID pandemic lockdowns. With extra time on her hands, she decided to help her parents digitize their old family photographs, boxes and albums full of memories from the 1980s and 90s. It was a project she'd been meaning to do for years, a chance to preserve family history. She had no idea she was about to discover something that would shatter her understanding of reality. The photograph that started everything was a professional family portrait taken at a Sears photo studio, the kind of formal family picture common in the 1990s. The date stamp on the back read December 15th, 1992. Jennifer would have been 10 years old. In the image, she's standing next to her parents, and beside her is a boy who appears to be about 7 or 8 years old. He has the same dark hair as Jennifer, the same smile as her father, the same eyes as her. Mother, he's wearing a red sweater, his hand resting on Jennifer's shoulder. They look like siblings. They look like a family. But Jennifer has no memory of this photo being taken. More importantly, she has no memory of ever having a brother. She's an only child. Always has been. Or so she thought. Now here's where it gets absolutely insane. When Jennifer showed the photograph to her mother, Susan, she watched her mother's face go pale. Susan stared at the image for a long time before saying, "This can't be real. We never took this picture. You don't have a brother." Her father, Richard, had the same reaction, insisting the photo must have been doctored somehow, perhaps as a prank. But who would do that, and why? Jennifer took the photograph to a forensic photography expert in Portland. The analysis took 3 days, and the results were deeply unsettling. The photograph was genuine. It was printed on Kodak paper stock from the early 90s, using chemical processing methods that predated digital photography. There was no evidence of physical manipulation, no signs of cutting and pasting, no digital editing artifacts of any kind. The grain pattern was consistent throughout the image. The lighting and shadows were correct. This was an authentic photograph from 1992, showing a family that should not exist. But wait, there's something even more terrifying. After finding the first photograph, Jennifer began searching through all the family albums. What she discovered sent chills down her spine. There were dozens more photographs of the mystery brother, birthday parties where he was blowing out candles, Christmas mornings where he was opening presents, vacation photos at the beach where he was building sandcastles beside Jennifer, Halloween pictures where the two of them were dressed in matching costumes, an entire photographic history of a childhood shared with a sibling who didn't exist. Think about this for a moment. These weren't just random photos. They documented years of a child's life, from what appeared to be ages 4 through maybe 11 or 12. Then the photos stopped. No teenager pictures, no adolescent years. Just this span of childhood, captured in dozens of images, before mysteriously ending. Jennifer's parents examined every photograph with growing horror. They recognized the locations, the clothes they were wearing, the ages they appeared to be. But they had absolutely no memory of a son, no memory of a second pregnancy, no birth certificate, no medical records, no school enrollment, nothing. It was as if the boy had been photographically inserted into their lives, but erased from everyone's memories. And then, something truly unsettling happened. Jennifer started having flashes of memory, brief fragmented images of playing with a younger brother. She remembered teaching him to ride a bike. She remembered arguing over who got to use the television. She remembered him following her around the house, annoying her the way little brothers do. These memories felt real, but everyone told her they weren't. Imagine that feeling, remembering something that everyone insists never happened. Some skeptics argue this could be an elaborate hoax, but to what end? Jennifer had no reason to fake this, and the emotional distress it caused her family was very real. Others suggest the photographs might have been created by someone else as a cruel prank and secretly inserted into the family albums. But forensic analysis showed the photos were as old as they appeared, and the albums themselves showed no signs of tampering. There's a darker theory that some researchers have proposed. What if Jennifer's brother did exist in another timeline, a parallel reality where her parents had 2 children instead of 1? What if something happened to merge elements of that timeline with ours? The photographs crossed over, providing physical evidence of a reality that no longer exists here. But why would the photos survive when the memories didn't? Why would Jennifer start remembering when no one else does? Some have even suggested something more tragic. What if the brother existed in this timeline but died young? And somehow everyone's memories were altered to cope with the trauma? The photographs remain because physical objects can't forget, but human minds found a way to erase the pain. But that doesn't explain why there are no death records, no grave, no documentation of a child who lived and died. To this day, Jennifer keeps all the photographs in a locked box. She's stopped showing them to people because the reactions are too painful to witness. Her parents refuse to discuss them anymore. The mystery boy in the red sweater smiles out from dozens of photos, a ghost from a timeline that may or may not have ever been real. So, what do you think? Are these photographs evidence of a parallel timeline bleeding into ours? Could Jennifer have somehow shifted from a reality where she had a brother to one where she's an only child, bringing only the photographs with her? Or is there a rational explanation that accounts for dozens of authentic family photos showing a child who never existed? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, if this brother was real in another timeline, does he still exist somewhere, wondering why his family disappeared?